Well, hello and welcome. I am so excited you decided to join Wait for this lesson. Now, this lesson is a little bit unusual because we're going to be going into some depth about how to set up your piece for success. And what I mean by that is, imagine you have a new piece of music and you're looking at it and you're thinking, how am I going to ever get through this piece? Well, that is what this unit is about. It's about setting your piece up for success. So before we begin, I want to introduce myself very quickly. I am Monta Monique, founder and creator of Moo Over Mozart, the only place where you can learn music how you want, where you want, and when you want. So now that that's out of the way, I want to remind you to please download the Setting Your Piece Up for Success. It's a free download, and you need to download this so you can follow along with this lesson. So for today's lesson, we are going to start with the number one part of setting your piece up for success. Now, I want to remind you that there are 10 steps as part of this overall setting up your piece for success. But specifically in this lesson, we are going to be looking at step number one. So step number one is numbering the measures. Now, if you're completely new to piano or to music, I'm going to answer this question for you. And the question is, what is a measure? So a measure can look something like this. It doesn't always have to, but it can look something similar to this, or sometimes it can look like this. But don't be alarmed, we're gonna start and keep it very basic. Now, the next question is, why do we number the measures? Well, there's a few different answers for that. Well, there's probably a new answer for every new person you ask, but for today, we're gonna keep it pretty simple. So there's two main reasons. It helps you keep your place in the music. Say, for example, you're practicing and you are filling out your daily music checklist or your music journal, and you say, okay, I want to practice and perfect measures 1 through 5 today. It helps you keep your place in the music. Now, the second part of this is synchronization, and this is very important, and actually it's imperative if you are playing, for example, a duet on the piano with someone else. And let's say you need to do something together, let's say at measure 6, you need to start together. So if your partner, your duet partner, is on measure 5 and your measure 6, the music won't come together properly. So it's to synchronize and help all of the players be at the same point or the same beat, the same place in the music. All right, now, before we go on, we're going to explore together how we number the measures. Now, again, this can differ from person to person. I'm going to show you how I number the measures and what has worked for me. Now, before we jump into number one, I want to remind you that in the next lesson, we'll be determining the tempo. So just a little heads up, that's the number 2 step. So after we finish lesson number 1, how to number the measures, I want you to start thinking about the next lesson, or the next part, number 2, how to determine the tempo. So for this example, to number the measures, we're going to be looking at a piece, Minuet in A minor, and this is what it looks like. Now let's jump into my screen, and we'll also be at the piano, and we're going to explore together how do we number the measures as part of number 1, setting your piece up for success. So let's work together on this piece, the Minuet in A minor. We're going to number our measures. So like I mentioned earlier, there are different places to put your numbers. So let me give you a few examples. So if you're the type of person that likes their measure numbers right at the beginning of the measure, that works. If you're the type of person that likes the number measure inside the measure, that can work too, but be very careful to make sure the number doesn't cover up a note. So let me give you the wrong example, and I'm going to put this in the color red so we know this is what we're not going to do. So when you're numbering your measures, you don't want to write, for example, a number 3 here because that covers up the finger number, or you don't want to write a measure number, let's say for example, on top of a note, because then you can't see the note that you need to play. So let's erase those and let's go back. So let's grab a pencil. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you're the type of person that likes to use colors, you can do that. But for this case, I'm just going to use a regular black pencil. So we have measures 1 and 2, and I think for this example, I think I'm going to put my measure numbers inside the measure, being careful not to cover up any important information. Now, the nice thing here is they already have some measure markers, but if you have ever been in a competition before, or if your teacher requires that you number each measure, you still, and if it were me, I would still write my own number 5 in the measure, just because I think when you're practicing, you can easily identify your own writing. Now, remember we talked about way measures look, and so here's an example of a different type of measure. And so if you remember back to one of our previous lessons, this is a repeat sign, so that means you would go back to measure number 1. But for this example, we're going to keep numbering our measures because that's the focus. So here we have measure 9, and we have 10, 11, 12, 13. Moving down, then we have measure 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And if you need to pause the video if I'm going too fast, that's fine. Just pause it and pick up where we left off. Measure 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. And let's just check to make sure we have all of our measure numbers correct. And we have a repeat sign here. So one thing I want to emphasize to you again is one of the reasons we number our measures is, let's say for example, I am writing in my practice journal and I am wanting to reach a specific goal for my week of practice. So let's say for this week, I really want to be successful in memorizing measures 1 through 8. So the great thing about numbering your measures, and I'm just going to grab a colored pencil here just to give you an outline. So I know that I am going to memorize measures 1 through 8. So that's one great reason to number your measures. Now, something else that is also beneficial for numbering your measures is, let's say I am having a difficult time playing measures 22, 23, and 24. So I know that when I go to my practice journal, I am going to be very specific and say I'm going to slow practice measures 22, 23, and 24. So you just completed your lesson, and I want to tell you, a job well done. Learning a new instrument is not easy. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And if you'd like to share your music with me, that would be most exciting. All right, we'll see you at your next lesson.